The Mistress He Regrets Losing. Chapter 1. The Last Night. The penthouse smelled like expensive lies. Sienna sat on the edge of Alessandro's white leather sofa, the one she'd never been allowed to pick out, in the apartment she'd never been allowed to call home, and watched the city lights blink 67 floors below. Her 2 suitcases stood by the door like soldiers at attention. Everything she owned that mattered fit into 2 bags. 3 years, and she could walk away with less than she'd arrived with. Funny how that worked. Her phone buzzed in her lap. Another text from Jade. You actually leaving this time, or should I put the wine back? Fair question. Sienna had threatened to leave before. Twice, actually. Once when Alessandro forgot her birthday because he was in the Hamptons with Vanessa's family. Once when she saw photos of him and his fiancée at some charity gala, the same type of event where they'd met, except this time Sienna wasn't catering, she was just absent. Both times, he'd talked her down, whispered the right words in the dark, made promises that felt true at 2 a.m. when his walls came down, and he told her things he swore he'd never told anyone else. Both times, she'd stayed. But tonight was different. Tonight, she'd heard him on the phone in his study, door cracked open just enough for his voice to carry. She'd been in his kitchen, never theirs, making coffee the way he liked it, 2 sugars and a splash of cream, when she heard him laugh. Actually laugh. June 15th, yes, he'd said, voice warm with something that sounded almost like joy. The plaza. Vanessa's been planning this for months. You know how she is. A pause. Then, of course I'm sure. It's time. We've waited long enough. Sienna had set down the coffee cup so carefully it didn't make a sound. She'd walked to the bedroom, pulled her suitcases from the closet he'd given her. 1 closet in a penthouse with 5 bedrooms, as if even her clothes needed to know their place, and started packing. She didn't cry. That's what surprised her most. 3 years of loving a man who kept her like a secret, and when the end finally came, her eyes stayed dry. Maybe you could only cry so many times before your body just gave up on the performance. The elevator dinged in the hallway. Sienna's heart kicked against her ribs like it was trying to escape before the rest of her could. She stood up, smoothed down the simple black dress she'd worn, not one of the designer things he'd bought her, but something she'd purchased herself back when she'd still had her own life. It didn't fit quite right anymore. She'd lost weight this past year, though Alessandro had never noticed. She heard his key in the lock. For a second, just one brief, stupid second, she wondered if she should hide the suitcases. Pretend everything was fine. Smile when he walked in and kiss him hello like she always did, like a wife except without any of the actual commitment or respect that came with the title. The door opened. Alessandro Castellano walked into his penthouse the way he did everything, like he owned not just the space but the air inside it. 6'2" of tailored Italian suit and inherited arrogance, dark hair styled perfectly despite the late hour, those gray eyes that had once made her feel like the only woman in the world now scanning the room with the distracted efficiency of a man with more important things to think about. He was on his phone. Of course he was. Tell Moretti if he wants the property, he'll meet our price. I don't negotiate with. His eyes landed on the suitcases. He stopped walking. Stopped talking. Just stopped. Sienna watched him process what he was seeing. Watched the exact moment understanding clicked into place behind those sharp eyes. His phone slowly lowered from his ear. She could hear someone's tinny voice still talking on the other end, but Alessandro didn't seem to notice. Sienna. Her name came out rough. Careful. Like he was trying to calm a spooked animal. What's this? What does it look like? Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Good. She'd practiced this. Spent the last 3 hours rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd stand, where she'd look so she wouldn't fall apart. Don't look at his hands. Those hands knew every inch of her body. Don't look at his mouth. That mouth had promised her things in the dark that daylight always proved were lies. Look at the suitcases. Look at the door. Look at your future walking away from this place. It looks like you're trying to make a point, Alessandro said, and there it was, that edge of condescension that crept into his voice whenever she did something he considered inconvenient. He pocketed his phone, adjusted his cufflinks. What happened? Did Jade put something in your head again? Because we've talked about. I heard you. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. On the phone. Confirming your wedding date. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe. Or just annoyance at being caught. With Alessandro, it was hard to tell the difference. You were listening to my private conversation? He tried for outrage, but it fell flat. The door was open. Your voice carries. Sienna crossed her arms, felt the ghost of where he'd held her just last night, and forced herself to continue. June 15th. The plaza. Vanessa's been planning for months, apparently. Sounds lovely. Alessandro moved toward her, and she took a step back. The look on his face, she'd never seen it before. Not in 3 years. It almost looked like panic. Sienna, wait. Let's talk about this like adults. Adults. The laugh that escaped her throat sounded foreign. Bitter. Adults don't keep other adults hidden in penthouses for 3 years while planning weddings to other people. That's not adult behavior, Alessandro. That's called having your cake and eating it too. That's not fair. He ran a hand through his perfect hair, musing it for the first time that evening. You knew the situation when we started. You knew about Vanessa. We were honest about. You were honest about nothing. Sienna's voice rose despite her intention to stay calm. You said the engagement was a family obligation. Something you'd handle. You said you needed time. 3 years, Alessandro. I gave you 3 years of time. She thought about the beginning. God, the beginning had been beautiful. She'd been working the charity gala, one of dozens of servers in black and white, invisible to everyone who mattered. Except he'd noticed her. Asked her name while she poured champagne. Come back 3 times to her station, even though there were servers everywhere. I'm not here for the champagne, he'd admitted on the 3rd pass, and the way he'd looked at her had made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was the kind of woman men like him noticed. Their first date had been secret, just until I handle some family things, he'd said. The second date, too. By the 3rd month, the secrecy had become normal. By the 6th, she'd moved into this penthouse, and somehow the family things had crystallized into an actual engagement announcement in the Times. Just for appearances, he'd promised. It doesn't mean anything. You're the one I love. 3 years of just for appearances. 3 years of loving a man in private while another woman wore his ring in public. You knew what this was, Alessandro said now, voice dropping into that low, intimate register he used when he wanted to persuade her. He took another step closer. What we have is real, Sienna. What I have with Vanessa is it's business. Family obligation. You and I, what we share, that's the real thing. If I'm so real, why am I the secret? The question came out quieter than she intended. Sadder. If what we have matters, why doesn't anyone know I exist? He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he had the same answers he'd always given, about family expectations, business partnerships, complicated situations that required delicate handling. She'd heard them all before. Had believed them, once upon a time, when she'd been young enough and stupid enough to think that love conquered things like pride and public image. Sienna picked up her purse from the sofa. I'm done, Alessandro. You don't mean that. He moved to block her path to the suitcases. Not touching her, but close enough that she could smell his cologne. The expensive one she'd given him last Christmas, back when she'd still believed she had the right to give him gifts that mattered. You're upset. I understand. But you're not thinking clearly. Where will you go? The question hit her like a slap. Where would she go? Back to her studio apartment in Brooklyn that she'd somehow kept paying rent on all these years, like insurance against exactly this moment? Back to catering gigs and night shifts and an empty bed that was at least honestly empty instead of just feeling that way? Yes, exactly that. Because anything was better than this. Somewhere that doesn't require me to hide who I am. She reached for the handle of the first suitcase. Alessandro's hand shot out, gripped her wrist. Not hard, he'd never been rough with her, that wasn't his style, but firm enough to stop her movement. Sienna, please. Don't do this. We can figure it out. I just need a little more time to. You'll be back. Sienna froze. What? You'll be back, he repeated, and there it was. The arrogance that had attracted her in the beginning now repulsing her in the end. His thumb stroked the inside of her wrist like he was soothing a child. "You always come back. We'll fight, you'll leave for a few days, and then you'll remember what we have. What I give you. This life." He gestured around the penthouse, at the designer furniture and original artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like it belonged to them. "This isn't life," Sienna said softly, pulling her wrist free. "This is a cage. A really expensive, really beautiful cage, but still a cage." She grabbed both suitcases, headed for the door. "You won't last a week without me." His voice followed her, sharp now, defensive. Scared, maybe, though Alessandro Castellano would never admit to fear. "You think it's easy out there? You think you'll just, what? Go back to serving drinks at parties? You've gotten used to this. To us. You need this as much as I do." Sienna stopped at the door, hand on the handle. She should just go. Walk out. Let him have the last word because it didn't matter anymore. But something in her, some part that had been silent for 3 years, needed him to understand. She turned back. Alessandro stood in the middle of his pristine living room, suit still perfect, hair slightly messed from running his hands through it, looking at her like she was a problem he couldn't solve. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely afraid. "Good. You're wrong," she said. "I don't need this. I needed you to choose me. There's a difference." She opened the door. "Sienna." "Goodbye, Alessandro." She stepped into the hallway, pulling her suitcases behind her, and didn't look back. The elevator doors closed on his face, still shocked, still certain she'd turn around, and as she descended 67 floors back to ground level, back to real life, back to a version of herself she'd almost forgotten existed, Sienna felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Free. Her phone buzzed. "Jade. Wine's open. Doors unlocked. You better actually be on your way this time." Sienna typed back with shaking hands, "I'm coming home." And for the first time in 3 years, she meant it. Chapter 2. The goodbye he didn't believe. The elevator took forever to arrive. Sienna stood in the hallway, both suitcases gripped tight in her hands, staring at the brushed steel doors like they might save her if she concentrated hard enough. Behind her, she could hear Alessandro moving around in the penthouse. The clink of glass, probably pouring himself a scotch. He always did that when things didn't go his way. 2 fingers of Macallan, neat, like the solution to every problem came aged in a barrel. The elevator dinged. "Sienna, wait." She closed her eyes, took a breath, told herself not to turn around. She turned around. Alessandro stood in his doorway, drink in hand, leaning against the frame with that casual elegance he'd perfected over 34 years of getting exactly what he wanted. His tie was loosened now, top button undone. He looked like a cologne ad. Troubled billionaire seeks mistress willing to accept crumbs. No reasonable offers refused. "Come back inside," he said. Not quite a command, not quite a request. That middle ground he'd mastered where everything sounded like a suggestion but felt like an order. "Let's talk about this like rational people." We did talk. "I'm done talking." Sienna hit the elevator button again, even though it had already arrived, doors open and waiting. "You're overreacting." He took a sip of scotch, and she wanted to throw something at him. Preferably something heavy. "I understand you're upset, but you're not thinking clearly. Come inside. Have a drink. We'll work this out like we always do." Like we always do. As if the problem was a simple misunderstanding instead of 3 years of her life spent waiting for him to choose her. 3 years of cancelled plans because Vanessa needed him at some function. 3 years of holidays spent alone because he was with his real family. 3 years of loving a man who loved her back just not enough. There's nothing to work out. Sienna stepped into the elevator, dragged her suitcases in after her. "You're getting married in June. To someone else. That's pretty clear-cut, Alessandro." "It's not that simple." He moved toward the elevator, and for a second she thought he might actually follow her in, might actually chase her. But he stopped just outside, one hand on the doorframe. "You knew what this was from the beginning. I never lied to you about Vanessa, about the expectations, about keeping me hidden like I'm something shameful." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, echoing in the elevator's small space. "You're right. You never lied. You were very upfront about treating me like a secret. His jaw tightened. There, that flash of anger he usually kept buried under all that smooth control. That's not fair. I gave you everything. This apartment building, I own it. You could have stayed here rent-free. I offered to buy you a place of your own. I've supported. I didn't ask you to support me. Sienna's hand hovered over the door close button. I asked you to love me enough to actually be with me. Turns out those are different things. I do love you. He said it quietly, and God help her, she almost believed him. Almost. What we have is real, Sienna. What I have with Vanessa is just... it's an arrangement. A business merger dressed up in a wedding. You're the one I come home to. You're the one I'm the one you hide. She pressed the button. The doors started to close. There's a difference between being someone's home and being their hotel. Alessandro's hand shot out, stopped the doors from closing. He stepped partially into the elevator, close enough now that she could smell his cologne mixing with the scotch on his breath. Close enough to remember every night she'd spent in his arms believing his promises. Don't do this, he said, and for the first time tonight, he sounded genuinely worried. Not panicked. Alessandro Castellano didn't panic, but concerned in that controlled way he approached everything. You're upset. I get it. But walking out isn't going to solve anything. We can figure this out. I can talk to Vanessa, see if we can delay. Delay what? The wedding. Sienna laughed, and it came out bitter. Broken. So you can string me along for another 3 years? Another 5. How long exactly should I wait for you to decide I'm worth more than a secret? It's not about worth. His free hand reached for her face, and she jerked back. The hurt that flashed across his features almost made her feel guilty. Almost. You know how complicated this is. My family, the business, the... I don't care. The words felt good. Honest. I don't care about your family or your business or whatever excuse you're about to give me. I care that I'm 28 years old and I've spent 3 years of my life loving a man who won't even admit I exist to his own mother. She reached into her purse, the Chanel one he'd bought her for their 2nd anniversary because apparently expensive leather was easier than commitment, and pulled out her keys. His penthouse key on a Tiffany keychain. The spare to his car she'd never been allowed to drive in public. The key to his office that she'd used exactly once, late at night when the building was empty and there was no risk of anyone seeing her. She held them out. Alessandro stared at the keys like she was offering him a live grenade. Sienna. And these. She pulled out the credit cards. Black Amex. Platinum Visa. All with her name embossed on them, all connected to his accounts. I don't want them. Don't be ridiculous. How will you? I managed before I met you. I'll manage after. She pressed the keys and cards into his palm, ignored the way his fingers tried to close around hers. I don't want your money, Alessandro. I never did. I wanted you. Just you. Apparently that was too much to ask. He stood there holding the keys and cards, looking at them like he couldn't quite process what was happening. You're serious? Yes. You're actually leaving? Yes. Over a wedding that doesn't even mean anything to me? Sienna felt something inside her chest crack. If it doesn't mean anything, cancel it. Choose me instead. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. She watched him struggle with it, saw the war happening behind his eyes. Duty versus desire, obligation versus love, the life he was supposed to want versus the woman he actually wanted. She already knew which side would win. Had known for 3 years, really. But some stupid, hopeful part of her had needed to ask. Needed to give him one last chance to prove her wrong. You know I can't do that, he said finally, quietly. And there it was. The truth he'd been dancing around for 3 years, served up plain and simple in a hallway at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Then we're done. Sienna pressed the door close button again. This time, Alessandro stepped back. Let the doors start their slow slide shut. But his eyes never left hers, and in them she saw something she'd never seen before, actual fear that she might not be bluffing this time. You'll be back, he said, and just like that, the fear was gone, buried under that infuriating confidence. You always come back, Sienna. You'll spend a few days at Jade's, realize how much you miss us, and you'll be back. You know you will. The doors were almost closed now, just a sliver of space left between them. I won't, she said. You will. His smile was small, sad, certain. Because you love me. And I love you. And that's enough. It's always been enough. The doors closed on his face. Sienna's knees went weak. She slumped against the elevator wall, suitcases forgotten on the floor, and pressed her palms against her eyes. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. You made it out. You actually made it out. Don't fall apart now. The elevator descended. 67. 66. 65. She'd really done it. After 3 years of almost leaving and maybe leaving and threatening to leave, she'd actually walked out. With her suitcases. With her dignity. Without his keys or his credit cards or any of the expensive things he'd used to make her feel like the cage was comfortable enough to stay in forever. 42. 41. 40. The tears came anyway. Silent at first, then not so silent, until she was full-on crying in an elevator at the kind of building where cameras caught everything and someone was definitely going to see this footage and know that Alessandro Castellano's secret just fell completely apart. She didn't care. Let them see. Let them know. Let the whole world know she'd been stupid enough to love a man who'd never love her enough. 23. 22. 21. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Probably Alessandro. Probably some message about how she was being irrational, how they could work this out, how he'd find a way to delay the wedding just long enough to convince her to stay hidden a little while longer. She almost didn't check it. Almost threw her phone against the elevator wall just to watch something break the way she was breaking. But she looked. The message wasn't from Alessandro. Jade, emergency wine and ice cream standing by. Also, I may have invited Marcus and Yuki over because you're going to need a full support team, and Marcus bought the expensive chocolate. Doors open. We love you. Get your ass over here. A laugh bubbled up through Sienna's tears. Wet and messy and real. Below that, another message. Jade, also I know you're probably crying in an elevator right now because you're predictable like that, but I need you to know something important. You just did the bravest fucking thing I've ever seen you do. I'm so proud of you I could cry. But I won't because one of us needs to be the strong one when you get here. Drive safe. Love you. And below that, one more. Jade, P.S. He's going to regret this. They always do. You're a goddamn catch and he's an idiot in an expensive suit. His loss. Sienna wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, mascara smearing, and typed back with shaking fingers. On my way. Save me the good ice cream. The elevator hit the ground floor. The doors opened onto the marble lobby where she'd walked in 3 years ago with stars in her eyes and hope in her heart, back when Alessandro Castellano had looked at her like she was the only woman in the world instead of just the only woman in his bed. She picked up her suitcases. Walked past the doorman who'd seen her come and go 1,000 times but never once acknowledged her as anything more than a guest. Pushed through the revolving doors into the New York night.